That evening, in the small town of Willow Creek, three locals sat under the town's oldest oak tree, chatting among themselves. This power outage again? Every evening. Like clockwork. The lights go out, said Mark, shaking his head. Yeah, it's become a daily drama now, added Josh. But you know what? Sitting here with hot snacks and chatting makes the evening enjoyable. True, agreed Dylan. But hey, where's Uncle Ray? It's not the same without hearing one of his spooky stories. Spooky stories? Mark scoffed. Come on, those are just old tales. I don't believe any of that. Really? Josh smirked. What about last time, when Uncle Ray talked about that abandoned well near Parker's old farm? He swore something sinister lurked inside. Probably just a made-up legend, Mark insisted. People like to believe in scary things, but that doesn't mean they're real. As they debated, an elderly man approached them. Well, what's the talk of the evening? The familiar voice made all three turn their heads. Uncle Ray, Dylan exclaimed. We were just wondering if you'd show up. The power's out again, as usual. Ray chuckled as he settled onto a wooden bench. I may be older than you boys, but I enjoy a good chat more than sitting with the old folks gossiping about town matters. Josh handed him a warm paper bag. Here, Uncle Ray, fresh onion rings and fries. Ah, now that's what I call an evening, Ray said, taking a bite. So, what shall I tell you tonight? Dylan leaned forward eagerly. Uncle Ray, have you ever seen a ghost with your own eyes? Ray took a deep breath, his expression shifting to something unreadable. You boys think my stories are just tales, don't you? But I've seen things in my time, things I wish I hadn't. The group fell silent. All right, Ray continued. Tonight, I'll tell you something different. Not just scary, but something that will stay with you long after this night is over. The young men exchanged glances. Ray had their full attention now. This happened when I was young, just starting my job as a doctor. He began. I was stationed in a small, remote town called Maplewood. It was far from the city, almost forgotten by time. Electricity barely reached there, and the nights were eerily quiet. I loved that town, he went on. The people welcomed me like one of their own. But one evening, two locals came to visit me. How do you like our town, Doc? One of them had asked. I love it, I told them. It's peaceful and beautiful. That's good to hear, Doctor, the other man said. But we came to warn you about something. I frowned. Warn me? You live right at the edge of town, near the woods, one of them said hesitantly. And that place, well, it's not exactly safe. What do you mean? I asked, suddenly intrigued. After dark, don't wander too far, he said, and try to be home before sundown. Especially avoid the road leading into the woods behind your clinic. Why? I asked, a strange chill creeping up my spine. The men exchanged nervous glances. That road has a dark reputation. People who walk alone at night, sometimes they don't come back. You mean criminals? I asked. No, doctor, the man whispered. Not criminals. Something worse. I wanted to laugh, but something in their eyes stopped me. That was the first time I realized maybe, just maybe, some stories aren't just stories. Ray fell silent, staring into the darkness. The three young men sat frozen, the warmth of their snacks forgotten. What happened next, Uncle Ray? Dylan finally asked. Ray's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. Ah, now that's the part that'll give you nightmares. That night, the town of Maplewood was covered in darkness. Thick clouds blanketed the sky, making the night feel even more ominous. After a long day at the clinic, I had eaten a quick meal and gone to bed early. But suddenly, a loud knock jolted me awake. "Doctor, are you asleep? Please, it's urgent. Open the door." Half asleep and annoyed, I groggily sat up. Who could be knocking at this hour? For a moment, I forgot I was a doctor. But then it hit me. Someone must be in serious trouble. I got up and opened the door. A middle-aged man stood outside, his face partially hidden in the dim light. He looked vaguely familiar. Probably a local, but I couldn't recognize him immediately. "Who are you? And what are you doing here this late?" I asked. "Doctor, please," the man pleaded. "Can you come with me? My mother is very sick. She can't even get out of bed." I hesitated. "Where do you live?" "My house is in the next town," he explained. "Just past the woods. My father is too old to travel, so I had to come alone to get you." His concern for his mother touched me. Without thinking much, I grabbed my medical bag and stepped outside. "Is your house far?" I asked as we walked. "Not too far," he said. "We'll be there soon." The air was chilly, thanks to the damp weather, and an eerie silence filled the streets. "What's your name?" I asked. "Greg," he replied, leading the way. I followed close behind as we entered the forest trail. The trees loomed over us, casting long shadows on the narrow path. Something fell off. My mind drifted back to the warning from the locals. Never walk alone at night, especially near the woods. "Greg, is there no other road to your house?" I asked, trying to mask my unease. "There is," he admitted, "but this one is faster. We need to hurry. My mother is in pain." I nodded, focusing on the task at hand. As we walked deeper into the woods, I suddenly felt as if we weren't alone. I could hear faint whispers behind us. "Greg," I whispered, my heart pounding. "Someone's following us." He turned to glance over his shoulder. "Walk faster," he muttered. We picked up our pace, but so did the footsteps behind us. The whispers grew louder. "Hey, you too! Stop right there!" A deep voice called out. Two shadowy figures emerged from the darkness. "Hand over everything you've got," one of them demanded, "or we'll make sure you never leave these woods." "I don't have anything," Greg protested, "and he's just a doctor. We're going to treat my mother like we care." The other man sneered. "Now hurry up, empty your pockets." Greg's face turned pale. "Please, my mother is really sick." "Then let her die," one of the men laughed. And then something happened. The two men suddenly froze, their eyes wide with terror. Their laughter turned into screams. They turned and ran, vanishing into the darkness as if something invisible was chasing them. Greg and I stood there breathless. "What just happened?" I whispered. Greg swallowed hard. I don't know, but we need to go. Now." Without wasting another second, we rushed through the forest, finally reaching his house. But as we stepped inside, one chilling thought remained in my mind. What exactly did those men see in the darkness? And why didn't we see it? "There it is. That's my house," Greg said, pointing towards a small wooden home at the edge of the woods. I turned to him. "Aren't you coming inside?" Greg hesitated. "No, you go ahead. I'll be right here." Something about his tone felt off, but I didn't argue. I stepped inside. An elderly woman lay on a creaky bed, her face twisted in pain. Beside her sat an old man, worry etched deep into his features. It wasn't hard to tell that she was in bad shape. As soon as I introduced myself, relief washed over them. "Doctor, you have no idea how grateful we are that you came," the old man said, his voice shaking with emotion. In the rush of the moment, I had completely forgotten about Greg. There was no time to take her to the hospital, so I decided to treat her right there. "She has a very high fever," I told the old man. "Traveling in this condition would be dangerous. I'll give her an injection. It should help." Wasting no time, I administered the shot. Within 30 minutes, she started showing signs of improvement. "You're a godsend, doctor," the old man said, tears in his eyes. "If you hadn't come in time—" "Don't worry," I assured him. "She'll be fine by morning. And I'm not a godsend. You're just lucky to have a son like Greg." At my words, the old man's face suddenly went pale. "Greg," he whispered. "Yes, Greg. He came to my house and told me his mother was sick. That's why I rushed over." The old man's hands trembled as he clutched the armrest of his chair. "Doctor," he said slowly, "are you sure it was Greg who called you?" "Of course," I replied, confused. "He even walked me through the woods. He's waiting outside right now." The old man didn't say a word. Instead, he reached for an old, worn-out photo from a nearby drawer and handed it to me. "Was this the man who brought you here?" he asked. I looked at the picture. There was no doubt. "Yes, this is Greg," I confirmed. The old man's eyes filled with tears. "Doctor," he whispered, "Greg has been gone for a year. He died in a car accident on his way back from the city." A chill ran down my spine. "No, that's not possible," I stammered. "He was just here. He walked me through the woods. He told me to go inside and said he'd wait outside." The old man shook his head. "He won't be there anymore," he said quietly. "His work here is done." I ran to the door and looked outside. The woods were empty. The night was silent. Greg was gone. The first rays of dawn were breaking over the horizon, but I stood frozen in place, my heart pounding. Somewhere in my soul, I knew the truth. Greg had never left his mother's side. Not in life. Not in death. I turned back to the house, glancing one last time into the fading darkness. A devoted son never truly leaves.